If you are considering relocating to Madagascar, which bank should you work with? I work with almost all of them, not by chance, but as a deliberate strategy, and I will give you my verdict at the end, including one bank I clearly advise against. What I am offering here is my perspective as a user. No criticism, no promotion, just a practical, real-life experience. We will go through the main players in the sector, their strengths, their limitations, and I will give you my verdict at the end, including one bank I clearly advise against. So let's start by setting the scene. Who are these banks and how does the system work? The Malagasy banking landscape. The first thing to understand is that the banking sector in Madagascar is largely dominated by foreign-owned banks. There are very few truly Malagasy banks. The market is controlled by players from France, Mauritius, Morocco, Gabon, and Ivory Coast. Here are the main institutions in Antananarivo. Bank of Africa, it's an African banking network. BRED, it's a French bank. MCB, BMY, and SBM are three distinct Mauritius banks. AFG is an African group from Ivory Coast. BNI used to be French, it's now Malagasy owned. And BGFI is a bank from Gabon in Africa. There are also microbanks, but they operate very differently and mainly serve the local population. If you are an expatriate or a Western entrepreneur, you are unlikely to need them. One figure says a lot about the country. Only 10 to 15% of Malagasy adults have a bank account. This is why mobile money, Mvula, Orange Money, plays an absolutely central role in the local economy, sometimes even more than traditional banks. Why work with several banks? You may have noticed this if you have ever tried to transfer money to Africa from Europe or America. Compliance teams view this transaction with considerable suspicion. In the mindset of Western financial institutions, working with Africa equals risk. Risk of corruption, a risk of money laundering. Everyone fears US or European sanctions. That is also why major Western banks have gradually left Madagascar. French banks were historically part of the landscape in Madagascar. Société Générale sold its local network in 2024, and Crédit Agricole, which had taken over Crédit Lyonnais, sold BNI as early as 2014. These groups prefer to leave rather than to expose themselves to a regulatory risk they considered unmanageable. The practical consequence for us, incoming international transfers are heavily scrutinized. Some banks require an unreasonable amount of supporting documents once you exceed $3,000 to $4,000 per transfer. Others are more flexible with much higher thresholds. This is precisely why we choose to diversify. Having several banks means having options. If one blocks a transfer or becomes too restrictive, you have a plan B or even a plan C. Another point to anticipate, obtaining simple banking facilities such as an overdraft is extremely difficult in Madagascar, even for a solid company. That may not be an issue for me personally, but for others, it can be. Opening an account. It's easier than you think. Good news. Opening a bank account in Madagascar is relatively straightforward, even if you are not yet an official resident. The process is quite simple. If you rent an apartment, you go to the local administrative office, the Fukontani, where you are registered as a resident and issued a certificate of residence. This is what the bank will ask for. This document allows you to open a current account with one or several banks. You can then obtain a Visa card and be aware that banks will try to sell you their premium ranges, gold, platinum, and so on. It is up to you to decide whether it is truly worth the cost. Before going any further, a short pause. Choosing the right bank in Madagascar takes time, contacts, and local knowledge that you may not yet have. And this is exactly where a Malagasy virtual assistant can make a real difference, even before you set a foot on the island. A trained assistant familiar with the local economic landscape, can do this groundwork for you. Identify the most suitable banks for your activity, compare conditions, initiate contact, and prepare your files. You arrive in Antananarivo with a structured banking plan, not with unanswered questions. This is exactly what VAV offers. We currently have over 250 Malagasy virtual assistants working with English-speaking clients in Australia or the US, or with French-speaking clients in Europe and Canada. You contract with a US company or European company, receive a turnkey assistant, and do not have to manage sourcing, technical vetting, and local administrative complexities. Flexible service, accessible pricing, the link is in the description, with a contact form directly on the website. Which bank should you choose? The honest answer is it depends. It depends on your business sector, your need for international transfers, your expectations regarding digital tools, and above all, your relationship with your account manager. Because in Madagascar, as elsewhere, the right contact makes all the difference. If your activity inspires confidence, doors open. If you operate in a gray area, crypto for instance, expect refusals. On the digital side, there is a clear hierarchy. BOA is one of the simplest for domestic transfers. Everything is done online with SMS confirmation. BMOI allows full online management with clear and efficient interface. Bread is also fully digital, but more demanding regarding the nature of your transfers and recipients. AFG is probably the most advanced digitally. Everything is done online smoothly. On the more traditional side, SBM does not allow transactions via its website. You need to call, send forms by email, or visit a branch. MCB requires a physical token to validate transfers, restrictive but secure. PNI requires your account manager to call you to validate each new beneficiary. More friction, but possibly more protection. More procedures often mean stronger security. It is up to you to decide what matters most. Branches and ATMs. If you regularly visit branches, some banks have invested in modern, pleasant spaces, notably AFG, MCB, and BGFI. Others are more rustic. I will let you judge for yourself. The relationship branch level also matters. We experienced this with BMOI. Our first contact at the Zoom complex in Tana was frankly disappointing. Changing branch changed everything overnight. The advisor truly makes the difference. As for ATMs, known locally as GAPs, the situation is clear. BOA has by far the largest network, with around 180 machines across the country. BNI follows with about 60 locations, well established in major cities. Bread comes next, with solid urban coverage, but less extensive overall. If you stay in Antananarivo, you will have no issue finding branches and ATMs. Outside the capital, coverage becomes a key factor. My verdict: real experience, not theory. Everything I've shared comes from real experience. Years of transactions, calls with advisors, blocked transfers, and resolved situations. First piece of advice: never put all your eggs in one basket. Work with at least 2 banks. Diversification is not optional in Madagascar. It is essential. Second observation: African origin banks are generally more flexible on compliance than Mauritian or European banks, which tend to be more demanding, sometimes excessively so. And now, BGFI. I have deliberately said little about this bank, and here's why. During my first incoming international transfer with them, they provided incorrect banking details. Their mistake, documented in writing. The transfer never went through. I incurred around $120 in fees. When I presented the evidence, they refused to acknowledge their error and reimburse me, something any reasonable company would have done without hesitation. My advice: avoid BGFI. I'm Frank Janet, founder and managing partner of VAV. If you found this video useful, consider subscribing. More content is coming on expatriation and entrepreneurship in Madagascar. And if you are looking to hire a French-speaking virtual assistant from Madagascar without the hassle, the link is in the description.